Okay, so now I think we're ready to pack our case. Just once again, we have the teeth roughened. Everything is separated. I like to use a font stock just to scoop up some of the acrylic from my mixing bowl. And I also have a surgical blade here that we'll use a little bit later on to cut some of the excess acrylic. We got some cellophane sheets, some separating sheets for trowel packing, which I'm only going to trowel pack the upper and I won't trowel pack the lower just to show the variation. And I have some clinical gloves here and some paper towels in case I need to use them. Okay, so we waited about 10 minutes or so, and it all depends on the temperature of the room. When you are mixing acrylic and packing acrylic, make sure that you're using a well-ventilated area. And right now, it's at the perfect consistency where I can scoop everything out and it's turned into a nice doughy mix. I can leave that on the side, wipe off my spatula, and continue to further manipulate the material using your hands just by gently squeezing it together. Remember, polymerization requires pressure and heat, and I have both of those right now using my hands. So I'm creating pressure and I'm applying a little bit of heat from my body temperature. So it's further encouraging the material to set. And you can manipulate it in different ways, stretch it and fold it upon itself, gently squeeze it together, and we get this type of consistency where it's somewhat stringy. And this is probably a good stage to start thinking about trowel packing. I wouldn't pack this if I was doing a one-time pack where you'd have to overpack, but certainly for trowel packing, you can start thinking about trowel packing here. So I'm going to take a little bit of acrylic, squeeze it in here, don't want to go beyond the wax up pattern that you've created before, somewhat there. And the rest of it, I'm going to put it back in the bowl and cover it again. So if you're trowel packing, you can certainly do this at the same time, but because I just want to show the variation, I'm just going to do the upper only. So one piece of separating sheet, a cellophane, what we call. Bring it over to my hydraulic press. Center it over the press. Squeeze it down as much as you can by hand. Close the valve. And then slowly bring up the pressure. And you can see it oozing out the side. Bring it up to about 100 bar. Right there. Okay. So from here, I'm going to release my valve. So the pressure goes down. Now I can open it, and I'm actually going to open it a little more because I know I have to put 2 flasks in there in my second trial. I'm going to open these flasks gently, and you can see there's a little bit of flash of acrylic off to the side. I'm going to remove my cellophane sheet. You can discard that, and you can cut off the excess with the blade just past the periphery. And remove the excess. And you can just rub it off with your hands. If you have a hard time picking it out, I like to use the tip of my font stock just to scrape it away. If you use the blade, you might scrape away the stone. This is a little more dull than the actual blade. Make sure you clean it all the way around. Don't leave any residue of this fine film of acrylic, because it will act as a spacer. Little pieces like that, trim them away. Just give it a gentle blow. Make sure there's no residue, any stone residue in there. Make sure you're working with a clean area as well. And now we are ready to do our final pack on this one and our initial pack on the lower. So if you are just doing a one-time packing, you want to wait a little bit longer than I did with this one. So this one now, it's still stringy, but I can feel it that it's starting to snap a little bit. Just getting everything. So once again, and until you're packing this one, it might be a good idea just to put the lid back on here so it doesn't dehydrate anymore, so the monomer doesn't evaporate. So again, start off by incorporating little pieces, and if you've noticed here now, this is somewhat snappy, or a lot more stringy than before. Just use small little pinches. Try not to put too much around the retromolar pad area here, because it's going to get in the way and you might have an open bite. So I'm going to introduce some material on the model side as well. Just kind of pitch it over the crest of the ridge. And if you've noticed now, by the time I get to this stage, is I felt it before, it's a lot more snappy than before. So this is at right there, I just snapped it off. So this is at the perfect consistency to do an overpack, therefore eliminating the trial pack. But you have to make sure that you have enough experience to know that you're actually overpacking the case, because if you do underpack it, then you're going to get porosity. So I'm going to close this up tentatively and then come back to this one and introduce a little more acrylic in here. So the size of a nickel here, here, and here. So take note how much acrylic I have left, which is pretty good. We're not wasting a whole lot of material. I could have used 30 cubic centimeters per unit, but I think I would be cutting it really close. So for an average size case, medium size case, I think 40 cubic centimeters of powder to 60 milliliters of liquid is about right. So here, I'm going to close it. Place my flasks back on the hydraulic press, center, squeeze it as much as you can, close your valve, and slowly bring up the pressure, and we should see some acrylic come out the side. More on the lower this time around than the upper, because I overpacked this one. This one I trial packed it, so there's minimal acrylic, as you can see, coming out the back. I'm slowly bringing up the pressure, and as I'm building pressure, I'm slowing down the amount, my rate. Let it rest for a bit. I'm not to 100 bar yet. And depending on the quality of the press that you're using and depending how accurate this gauge is, you might have to play around with being 100 bar or maybe less or more, and over time you get to feel the right amount of pressure. You get to feel what 100 bar feels like. So I'm not there yet, so I'm going to pull off some of the excess material. And you can clearly see now that the flasks are back together. I'm going to build up the pressure some more, and you can see just a hint of material coming out the side as I reach the 100 bar. So this is very important. We talked about eliminating having any stone between the lower half of the flask and the upper half of the flask. This is why it's important. A, it gives you a nice visual to see that your flasks are coming back together all the way around, so therefore you're not running the risk of having an open bite. So the flasks are purely, they're back together 100%. And also, if I am using excessive pressure here, all that pressure, which is close to 1500 psi, about 100 bars worth of pressure, it's absorbed by the metal, not the stone that's inside, that we could run the risk of breaking it. Okay, so it's very important that you don't have any stone between the lower half of the flask and the upper half of the flask when you're doing your investment. I got a little bit of stone here from before. I should have chipped it off before. Clean that off. Ideally, you should leave the flasks in the hydraulic press for about 15 to 20 minutes, if time allows. And then transfer over to your compress. This will further encourage the acrylic to polymerize and stiffen up a little bit, so it will prevent any relapse or opening of the flasks as I release the pressure from the hydraulic press to transfer over to the compress. So I like to leave it in for about 10, 15, 20 minutes or so. Leave it in the hydraulic press before I transfer over to my compress, and possibly eliminating any opening of the flask, as we have internal pressure build up from the acrylic, so the tendency is for the flasks to relapse and open up a little bit. So leave it in there for about 15-20 minutes, and then we're going to transfer it over. But for demonstration purposes, I'm going to do it right now, so we can keep it in one video. So I'm going to release the pressure. I'm going to take my flasks, center it over my compress, close the handle as much as I can, and then I'll take it over to the bench. Just want to make sure I'm a little more centered. And just to make sure that you have enough pressure here, I like to insert the handle facing it away from me. So I'm using it as leverage. Place the Allen key at about 45 degrees, and then just use my weight to start building up pressure as much as you can. If you just try to hand tighten it together, you won't be able to build up the pressure again. So make sure if you use this method, I think it'll go a long ways. If you're having a hard time, because this might be scraping your hand in here, the Allen key, what you can use an insulated glove just to cushion the blow a little bit, so you can add some more pressure. And that's about right. So this is ready to be cured. This is Lucitone 199. So this is going to go in the curing unit from room temperature water. We'll raise the water temperature to 73 degrees. We'll hold it for an hour and a half. then program the curing unit to raise the temperature again to 100 degrees and hold it for half an hour. So if we go over to our curing unit now, we're going to turn it on, and you can see now that the curing unit is flashing. That means it's on standby mode. So I'm not sure what program is in here, but I'm going to check it. Right now what it's telling me, it's on standby mode, and the water temperature right now is at 22.5 degrees Celsius. So if I use this arrow to the right, I can scroll through the program in various stages to see what's in there. So if I hit it once, it'll tell me, do you want to hold 22.5 degrees, whatever temperature's in there now, do I want to hold it for any time? I can increase it by as long as I want, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. It might be a good idea, or not. Then I'll scroll over to the next one. Now this tells me it will increase the temperature to the first set temperature. So we have it at 0. So if you have it at 0, this is the default. This is the slowest time. Or you can change the heat rate by increasing the heat rate. I suggest you leave it at 0 because it takes longer to get to the next temperature, which is ideal. The longer it takes to get there, the better it is. If I scroll again, it'll tell me the set temperature for the first stage. And right now it's 100. I don't want 100, I want 73. So I'm going to scroll down and hit 73 degrees Celsius. And then I'm going to scroll over again, and right now it's programmed to hold at 28 minutes. I don't want 28 minutes, I want an hour and a half. So I'm going to increase the hold time for the first temperature. I went a little too far, so I'm going to come back down for an hour and a half. And then I'm going to scroll over to the right again, and the next increase in temperature is a default of 0, which is good. And I'll scroll over again, and the next set temperature is at 100 degrees Celsius, which is what I want. So I'm going to leave that alone, and I'll scroll over to the right, and now it's going to hold it for 4 minutes. I don't want 4 minutes, I want an hour, sorry, half an hour. If I scroll over once more, it'll all flash. Just to be safe, I'm going to scroll over the program again. So we have the initial hold time at 0, or you can change it if you wish. The increase in temperature is set rate at 0, which is fine. The first set temperature is at 73, and it's going to hold that, which is this flat portion of the first set temperature, for an hour and a half. Scroll over again, increase rate at a minimum to the second set temperature at 100, scroll again, and it's going to hold that for half an hour. So I'm going to submerge my case in water, close the lid, and I'm going to press and hold depending on the unit when it was made. Sometimes you press it and it starts right away, but some units you might have to press them and hold for 3 seconds for that to happen. So this will finish. Right now what it's telling me that the cycle will take 2 hours to go through, but this does not take into consideration the increase in temperature. This is only taking into consideration, takes into consideration the holding times. So usually the increase in temperature is an additional half hour per increase. So in total you can anticipate this to be an overall of 3 hours. At which time this will flash again, so it'll go on standby mode. Make sure that you're going to use some insulated gloves to remove the case and leave it on the bench until it bench cools for at least 20 to 30 minutes before we take the flask in.